I was the mistake they never wanted to admit, until I made them all regret it. Part 1. I still remember the night my family turned their backs on me like it was yesterday. The air was thick with tension, the cheap wallpaper peeling in the dim light of our living room. My father's voice cracked with disappointment, or maybe it was disgust. "You'll never amount to anything, Ethan," he said, eyes cold and unforgiving. My mother didn't say a word. She just looked away, ashamed. They didn't want me. Not for the first time in my life, I felt like an outcast, a failure marked by birth and circumstance. We lived in a cramped, crumbling house on the edge of town, where dreams were traded for survival. Money was always tight. Food was often scarce. School was a daily reminder that I wasn't like the others. Teachers dismissed me as lazy. Classmates taunted me with nicknames like Dirt and Nobody. I hated them for their cruelty, but more than that, I hated myself. At 16, after another humiliating day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to save me. I was going to fight, alone if I had to. I started working odd jobs, washing cars, mowing lawns, delivering packages, anything to put a few dollars in my pocket. At night, I devoured books borrowed from the library, business books, biographies, anything about success. I taught myself to code on an old second-hand laptop I managed to buy after months of saving. It was hard, exhausting. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake, but I couldn't give up. I had a plan, a vision of a future where I wasn't invisible. 2 years later, I pitched my first app idea to a local startup incubator. They laughed. "You're just a kid with no experience," the lead investor sneered. "Come back when you have something real." But I didn't give up. I went back to my tiny room, fueled by a rage that burned hotter than anything I'd ever known. I coded day and night. I refined my idea. I failed over and over. And then, finally, I succeeded. My app caught the attention of a mid-sized company looking for innovation. They offered me a contract. The deal was small, barely enough to live on, but it was my foot in the door. I threw myself into the work. Long hours, endless meetings, trying to prove I was more than just a background character in my own life. But the deeper I climbed, the more I heard the whispers. The same people who had dismissed me as a kid still doubted me. One day, a former teacher, Mr. Collins, the one who told me I'd never graduate, confronted me in a hallway. "I never thought you'd make it this far," he said, shaking his head. I wanted to shout back, to say, "Look at me now," but I just smiled. Because the real battle wasn't their opinions. It was my own doubts. Then came the moment that shattered me. The company I was working with announced a merger, and I was the first to be cut. No warning, no chance to prove myself, just a cold email saying my services were no longer needed. I felt like I was falling into a void. Homelessness and hunger loomed on the horizon, but I refused to let despair win. I remembered a phrase I read once: "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts." I doubled down. Started my own small business. It was risky. I was alone, but every setback only fueled my hunger. Years passed. I grew my network, learned to negotiate, and built something real. Until one day the phone rang. It was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. They wanted to partner. The same people who once spat on my dreams were now calling me, begging for a deal. And for the first time in my life, I felt the sweet taste of victory. Part 2. The call from the CEO felt surreal, like a scene from a movie I never imagined I'd star in. I sat at my cluttered desk, heart pounding, staring at the glowing phone screen. "This is Ethan Brooks," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ethan, this is Laura Bennett, CEO of Vantage Technologies. We've been following your work. We want to talk partnership." For a moment, I froze. Laura Bennett, a titan in the tech world known for ruthless deals and impossible standards. The very industry that had crushed me once was now offering a hand. But beneath the excitement lurked a familiar fear. What if this was a trap? What if I'd be discarded again like before? I pushed the doubt aside. This was my moment. The meetings began. Days filled with presentations, negotiations, and strategic planning. At first, the atmosphere was icy. I could sense the thinly veiled skepticism behind polished smiles. "Are you sure you're ready for this scale?" one executive asked bluntly. "You've had your successes. But can you deliver under pressure? I met his gaze steadily. I'm ready. I've been preparing for this my entire life. Behind every word was a lifetime of fighting to prove I belonged. In those days, I replayed that family dinner in my mind. The laughter at my expense, the coldness in my father's eyes. I wondered how they would react if they saw me now, standing toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful people in the industry. One evening, after a long session, Laura took me aside. "You're not like others, Ethan," she said quietly. "You have fire. I respect that." Her words were a balm, but also a reminder. I couldn't let up. Success demanded everything. The months that followed were grueling. My company grew rapidly, the partnership opening doors I never dreamed possible. Yet, with growth came new challenges. Jealous competitors tried to undermine me. Old insecurities crept back in during quiet moments, and the shadow of my family's rejection still loomed. Then came the invitation, a charity gala hosted by a prominent business family, the same family I'd once called mine. I debated for days. Should I go, face the ghosts of my past? In the end, I decided to attend. Walking into the ballroom was like stepping into another world. The chandeliers glittered above, the music swelled, and every face seemed familiar. There was my father, older now, his jaw tight as he spotted me. My mother's eyes darted away quickly, avoiding any recognition. Old acquaintances whispered behind gloved hands. "Look who made it," one woman murmured, a bitter smile on her lips. I held my head high. For years they'd called me a failure, a lost cause. Now they were forced to reckon with the fact I was a force. I watched as they tried to approach. Hesitant greetings, forced smiles, attempts to reconnect. My father finally stepped forward. "I'm proud of you, son," he said, voice thick with emotion. I looked at him, searching for sincerity. Maybe it was there. Maybe it was just regret. "I hope you meant it," I said quietly. He nodded. But I wasn't sure forgiveness would come that easily. That night, I realized something important. Success didn't erase pain. It didn't fix broken bonds, but it gave me power. Power to choose who stayed in my life. To build new connections on my own terms. To finally say, I am enough. And that was the greatest victory of all. Part 3. Weeks after the gala, the calls started flooding in. Not just from business partners or industry giants, but from people I never expected to hear from again. Old friends who'd vanished when I had nothing to offer. Family members who had shunned me without a second thought. "Ethan, can we talk?" My mother's voice trembled over the phone one evening. I stared at the screen, memories crashing like waves. Years of silence, cold dinners, unspoken pain. Part of me wanted to slam the phone down. Another part wanted to scream, to tell her how much it hurt. Instead, I took a deep breath. "Sure," I said, voice calm but distant. We met at a quiet cafe. She looked older, wearier. "I was wrong," she said softly. "We all were. I'm sorry for pushing you away." I searched her eyes, looking for the truth beneath the regret. "Why now?" I asked. "When I was down, you weren't there." She faltered. "I was scared of what people would think. I thought if you left, maybe things would be better." I swallowed the hurt. "I don't know if we can go back," I said honestly, "but I want to try." Her words opened a door, a fragile one. Healing wouldn't be instant. Trust would take time. But for the first time, I allowed myself to hope. The next call came from my father. He sounded older, softer. "I miss so much, son. I want to make it right." We met in a park, under the autumn sky. I remembered the nights I'd spent wishing for his approval. Now I was finally free. "I forgive you," I said. Not because it erased the past, but because I wanted peace. And maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. The calls from old friends and colleagues continued. Some wanted to rekindle connections, others sought favors. I listened carefully, guarded my heart. Some relationships were worth saving, others were better left behind. With every decision, I grew stronger, not just as a businessman, but as a person. The hunger that once drove me was replaced with clarity. I had climbed out of the darkness, but I never forgot where I came from. Because my past, the pain, the rejection, it shaped me. It gave me fire, it gave me purpose, and most of all, it gave me myself. Standing on the rooftop of my new office building, looking out at the city lights, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not the loud triumph of wealth or status, but the calm power of someone who had survived. Who had risen, who had rewritten the story told about them. "I am more than your doubts," I whispered to the night, "and this is only the beginning."